Here we
There,
go. It's
there we
we're
go.
okay. We're live. It
Yes,
says.
we are. Hello,
All right.
everyone out
So
there. Right? Oh wait, do I do that? Make an intro? Okay. Hello, everyone out there. Welcome to TNT Politics. This is Anthony Medina from Los Angeles, California, and this is the lovely.
Tara
You're not
Van
gonna.
Dyke. You can call me Tara or Tara. People. Most of my most what, since I've been abroad, living abroad since 2000. Most people call me Tara, but technically it's Tara. So anyway, Tara.
Well, thank you all for coming and watching us this morning, or if you're around the world, maybe this evening or afternoon. We're here to speak to you all about Tara's experiences living in the Gaza Strip, I believe, in the early 2000s, if I'm not
2002,
mistaken.
2002 to 2004. So it was from August 2002 to June 2004. So 2 academic years. Yeah.
So Tara lived in the Gaza Strip in that time period during what was essentially the height of the Second Intifada. And I'd like to know what was the sort of prelude to sort of your background going there, and sort of how it intermingled with the sort of like keying off of that moment when that uprising occurred.
Yeah. So before that, it was kind of I kind of very much by accident or happenstance happened to end up being in Gaza for 2 years. So I'll backtrack a bit. I was getting ready to graduate from university with a bachelor's in sociology and two minors, a minor in American literature and a minor in feminist and women's studies. Before it
Whoop
was
whoop!
Yes, before that it was when it was women's studies. Before it was there was a
Gender
talent
studies, right?
takeover by the Butlerians, and it became gender studies, and people forgot what a woman was. But that's a story for another time, Anthony. So as you
True.
can imagine, so clearly when I went back to university, I followed courses that I was interested in, not what was going to actually get me a job. So, although of course you have transferable skills from that. But anyway, so I had a bachelor's in sociology and two minors in women's studies and American literature. And the reason why I had two minors is because there was it was a small state school, so Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. Shout out. Um, the gay capital, Ashland, Oregon, I'm sure it still is the gay capital and the Wiccan capital of Oregon.
Wow, that's pretty
Per
cool.
capita, the most gays, and well, it was just gays back then. It was just LGBT when I was there, and also the capital of Wiccan. So I had a lot of fun there. Um, anyway, so I wanted to travel, but I didn't have any money, and so I can't remember which professor I had. But she's like, um, oh, I know what. Her and her husband were thinking, and when they retired in a couple of years, we're going to travel around and travel around and teach abroad. So I guess that happens quite a bit. So when a place where teachers can retire in their late 50s, early 60s from secondary school or from higher ed, I guess a lot of times if they want to travel around, they'll take jobs working at international schools abroad, so they can travel and teach and still make money at the same time. Because usually, if you're working abroad at these schools, usually your housing is provided for, as is your travel. Like your travel, one round trip ticket per year is also covered. So a lot of people do that. Anyway, it started getting me thinking. So I got a job subsequently teaching English to young kids in Seoul, South Korea for a year.
Yes.
And so I went there, and South Korea was lovely. I had a great time in Seoul, but there's Hagwons, and so they're very. People probably know the stereotype, which is quite I find to be quite true. It's coming in. No, uh, is that of course Asian families tend to expect their children to be hyper focused on their education even at a young age. So in Korea, it wasn't unusual for grade school students, so students who are 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, from 7 years on, after they got home from school, they'd have a bit of a break and dinner, and then they would go to what they call hagwons for additional uh, training, so additional education, usually, oftentimes in English. So they'd have
Hmm.
English school for an hour, and maybe also math or whatever else their parents wanted them to bump up on. So you can imagine teaching these really tired students like 7 to 9 o'clock at night,
Right.
basic English. After it got close to a year, I was like, oh my God, my brain, I just can't do it. So I got online, and I'll skip forward, but I ended up then going to work for Microsoft in Shanghai, China for a year. This was in 2001. So 2001, so 2000, 2001, I was in Seoul. And then 2001, 2002, I was in Shanghai. And I took a job as a communication specialist for the Shanghai Microsoft office. Um, and basically, that sounds, they gave you a nice title because they weren't going to pay you very much. And they very much considered their giving you the job, the opportunity to work at Microsoft was itself a currency, which probably is true.
Right.
But anyway, the job is that they had subsequently, well before 2001, they had shifted a lot of their individual and small business customer service support to
Mm-hmm.
this office in Shanghai. And the engineers there, the Chinese engineers, the computer, I guess it's called engineers, computer engineers, whatever. They were their technical English was quite good, but their soft skills like conversational English was not. And so they were constantly pissing customers off and having like no idea why. All of a sudden, in the middle of an email exchange or a phone exchange, all of a sudden these customers were getting pissed off with them, and they were very confused by it. And so it's basically because I'll give you an example of what would happen. So why they decided they had to hire a bunch of these communication specialists out of university to come and work with their engineers in China, in Shanghai. So let's say that I have a problem, and I'm working with this customer support engineer in Shanghai. Although they made them all have English names, but that's another thing. And so and I'm saying, okay, thank you. First do this, and then get back to me. And so if the person would not do that correctly or would do something else, they'd say, dear so and so, this is like I don't, even though I clearly said do this, now you did this, and now it means, basically like it sounded like they were scolding them, and they weren't intending to. So so my jobs, I worked with the team. There was about 10 of us communication specialists. We each worked with like a different team there who was focused on different product or level of customer. And basically, when they were on a call with a customer, I was also on the call. So if things started to go sideways, I could put the call on hold and talk to the engineer about what was going on, so that if they were misunderstanding something, or how to get them to be calmer. Use their soft skills and workarounds and all that corporate buzz. And also their emails would go through me. So if they were emailing a customer, it would go through me first before it went to the customer. And then there'd be workshops where we would work on their customer service skills and whatnot. Because I was told then, I don't know if it's true, that there was no Chinese word for customer service.
Which is hilarious
That's
considering.
what I was told by the Chinese.
Yeah.
I was like customer service, like this is a total, Western bourgeois capitalist term. I don't know. So I did that. Excuse me. I did that for a year, and I knew then that I didn't want to stay in the corporate sector. And I'll just give you a bit of an insight. It was my half-year review, and I had a year contract. It was my half-year review, and of course the culture there was crazy. So most engineers, even the people, their jobs were like 40 hours a week. Most of them would work easy 60 hours a week, if not more. And they had rooms there that people could sleep in, and there's always food available. So it was like kind of like a hospital thing, the intern year or something, or a residency year. Anyway, so I was probably working like 45, maybe 46 hours a week or something, because of the team I was on. I cared about my team that I was on. If they were having a hard time, and if I had to stay an extra hour or so to help them out with that, I would do it, because their communication had to go through me, or be signed off by me. If they didn't want to wait the next day, then I would do that. But so, and I remember specifically I had this performance review. They're like, yes, your team's very happy with you, and they're really, I really appreciate the fact that you also attend the out of work things, so the dinners and the cultural things, and you're doing all the work and that. But we have to tell you that you're just not wowing us. We're not being wowed. Which is basically like I wasn't doing enough extra work, like, and I was like, well, sorry, I'm not wowing you enough. But at that point, I already knew that I wasn't going to try to stay in Microsoft or get a job at one of the other things, or branch out. because they were growing. Of course, their Asian operations were growing, and there was other offices opening up, not just in China, but in India and Malaysia and all over the place. And so I was like, yeah, So anyway, finally getting to Gaza. So I had about 6 weeks left of my contract there, and I knew I didn't want to stay. And so I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go back home. I thought maybe I'll go back to the States and go back to graduate school. Because at this point, I only had an undergrad degree, my bachelor's degree. And I got an email out of nowhere from this couple who I met in passing. Like I maybe had like 2 conversations with them in Korea. And because they were there, they were 2 retired school teachers from Canada, and they were teaching in South Korea at the same time I was, and we just happened to cross paths twice at a cool bar there that a lot of expats go to. I'll just leave it at that. It was Mike's Place or Mike's Bar. It was like decked out like a Harley Davidson place. Anyway, that's another story. Got an email saying, yeah, how are you doing? We don't know what you're up to, but Frances and I took a job at the American International School in Gaza. I'm going to be the principal, and she's going to be doing first grade. And we have a lot of, because I don't know if you're familiar with the issue, with the situation, but we're having about half of our positions are unfilled. And this was probably like May, somewhere around May, I think, sometime in May, and they were the school year started end of August there, and sometime in the last August. But of course, they want people to come there a few weeks early to get acclimated and all that. And so anyway, and I wrote back. I'm like, oh hey, how you doing, Fishers? And I said, I appreciate the offer, but you should know that I have a bachelor's degree, but I don't have a teaching certificate. I don't have a teaching credential. Because usually if you're going to teach I think it's everywhere, but I know in the States at that time and also here, that you do your 4-year degree, but then you usually do another year of something so you get your certificate to be able to teach. I didn't have a teaching certificate. I just had my bachelor's degree, and they were back. No, that's okay, because technically, yeah, they want people with a teaching certificate and a licensed teacher, whatever they call it. But at a certain date, if there's still positions filled, then it goes down to they want people who have their bachelor's degree at least, and they're from the United States, preferably, if not the United States or Canada, then the UK, and then Australia, New Zealand. Because at this time, the preferred accent was an American accent, not British, an American accent. So I was white, and I was an American, and I had I didn't realize the whiteness was important. That came later. But I was American, and I had, not from the South, like I had, like, they wanted the West Coast, or like, I didn't realize there was such a particular currency for a type of accent.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I wrote back, I'm like, well, okay. And so they gave me, there was like a list of things. There was like history, there was like art and something else, and then there was English and like writing and literature. And so anyway, I ended up taking a position teaching 7th, because they didn't have a graduating class yet. Their oldest class was the first year I was there was year 10, and then the second year I was there was year 11, because the school was the school was probably like 5 years old or something, maybe 6 years old, so they had to anyway. So 7th through 10th grade English, and so basically English and literature. So I taught literature courses, and also taught the English and writing courses. So this American International School, I say, is that all the courses were in English except for Arabic, of course, and religious studies. So there's Islamic studies and their Arabic studies, or their Arabic classes. So they also had Arabic writing and literature classes were in Arabic, but everything else was in English from kindergarten. So by the time I got there, so when I was teaching grades 7 through 10, their English was quite good. I mean, not everybody had like perfect English, but the English was all quite good. And some people, I couldn't tell the difference. Like I would have to, like, if I was blind, I wouldn't know that it was their second language or third language, as it could have been. So that's how I ended up in. So I just, I took the Fishers told me what it was actually like there, and I did a little bit of reading up on it. And I was like, how am I really going to pass up the chance of going to Gaza for 2 years? And of course, my family thought I was high as a kite because this was after 9/11 had happened. And
Right,
I
right.
actually lost a couple of friends. Well, I lost a couple of friends over it. Before this point, I don't think we had one conversation about Israel. But I had two friends that, um, well, yeah, they were older. So I worked as a waitress through college.
Mm-hmm.
And you make friends if you have regulars. You make friends when if you have customers that come in all the time, you make friends with them. And so
Right.
and I have people who this extended beyond me just being their favorite waitress that we would hang out sometimes with a beer, have coffee or whatever. And two of these guys they had Israeli passports, or they were Israelis and Americans, and I didn't know this. They both had done time in the IDF and went for their what they
Ah,
call the birthright visit and all this. And this had never come up before. And
right.
when I came back to the States, I had about 6 weeks after I left China before I had to get ready and go to Gaza. And so I spent some time in Portland with my family, but I also went to Ashland because I had been there for 5 years and had really good friends there. We showed up, and it was literally like people be like, these two men in particular were, you've been brainwashed and these are animals. And, I can't believe, it was basically like, you know, if you do this, then that's it. It was really, I was like, okay, it literally never before in like the 4 years that I knew them had this topic even come up.
Right.
So it was just,
It's crazy how serious
I
they
listened to what
were.
they had to say. And after listening to what they had to say, I wasn't like, okay, well, yeah, I'm not going to go. I didn't know. They were like,
Mhm.
so I was like,
Yeah,
okay. And
yeah,
my
that's
friends
pretty
thought I was
strange.
bonkers, but they couldn't stop me because, I was, what are they going to do? So.
Yeah, that's pretty strange that they would be that, serious, have a hard on like that. You know what I mean?
Well, no, at
Like,
that point I didn't know, but now I know why. But I mean,
okay.
because again, when I decided to take this job, I had like a surface understanding. Excuse me. Like I knew who Arafat was. I
Hmm.
knew I had heard so. I was falling. The various peace things had fallen apart. I kind of knew about the Intifada. I had like a very basic information. So I was by no, so I mean, so at that point it surprised me. But after I learned more about what was going on there, and the history of it, then it didn't surprise me because I met a lot of people when I was traveling in Israel. Uh, because we obviously had we had Friday and Saturday off. Friday is the holy day in Islam, so they go. That's their Yeah, so it's Sunday for Christians, Saturday for Jews, and Friday for Muslims. Um, anyway, so we had Friday and Saturday off, and since it was an American international school, and also there's quite a few Christians in Gaza and also in the West Bank, but we had both Muslim holidays and Christian holidays off. So we had lots of holidays. So
Right.
if the borders weren't closed, because again, this was before the blockade. So it was difficult to get in and out of Gaza. But if you were a foreigner and if you had a passport, because of
Hmm.
course there's no Palestine. Palestine doesn't issue any passports. But if you're a Palestinian who has a foreign passport, um, and then you could get in and out. It was difficult, but you could get in and out if there wasn't hostilities going on that would cause the border to close. So I spent quite a bit of time going around Israel. And I obviously, unless I was in East Jerusalem, I wouldn't say, people would just assume I'm a tourist, and I would let them assume I was a tourist. I was like, yeah, I
Mm.
work in Gaza. I live in Gaza. I was like, unless I,
So if
so,
you, yeah, yeah,
and then so people would speak freely, yeah. So because then you could just ask, like, you don't start off with it like, oh, so what's it like living here and with this and that, and then people would tell you, you know,
hmm,
so you just get an idea. And then I was like, oh, okay, so now again, like, I don't want to say that obviously not every person in Israel is a racist, but some of the most hardcore, just racists I've ever come in contact with were Zionists in Israel, bar
Jesus,
none,
I wonder what that is.
bar none. It's
Well, why
totally.
do you think that was?
You can say whatever you want to. In some places, like maybe like 60. I don't know. Just my experience. Again, not all of them, of course. I want to preface that. Let's not be children. I'm not saying I'm. A language is a universal medium. So if I'm talking about dogs, obviously I'm not talking about every dog, but or every drop of water. Um, but literally, the things they would say about cockroaches or animals or subhuman or this that, like they would say what time it is. I mean, it was just normal, normal.
That's
In
bizarre.
some parts. Again, I'm not talking about every single place,
What do you mean?
but
Like, okay, so like, you mean that they were just generally like super racist, just specifically
Zionism is
towards
racist.
Palestinians,
Zionism is
or do you mean?
yeah. So because it's basically if Zionism, as I understand it, again, I'm not a scholar in Zionism, but basically it's that the Jews are a chosen people, they're a special people, which by definition means everybody else is not. So the Goya, the whatever, this type of thing, and in particular, the people who are uh,
The
in the Holy
non-believers,
Land,
I guess.
the Palestinians who will not get out of to leave Israel, which they believe should be theirs from the river to the sea. Yeah, they're also dehumanized and whatnot. And of course, um, uh, the violence that has erupted. So when a Palestinian individual or a group returns violence with violence, acts violently, then that just gives them more of a reason. Like, see what we're saying. These people are, just. I don't have to tell you if you've been online at all and paying attention to not just online, but what people say in the news. You know what the shtick is.
Right.
You know? And so now, what's different this time is that. But anyway, I don't want to get too far afield. But I would just say is that um, uh, it was like I think it would probably have been like the only announce. I mean, I wasn't traveling around. I wasn't alive during slavery, and I wasn't alive during Jim Crow. I was born in 1977, so you know. But I would have to think that it would be like the things that I heard Zionist Israelis say about Palestinians in particular and Arabs in general would be like what you would expect, KKK people to say about Black people. Would be an American, and that would be what I would use. And it's not like you just whisper it. I mean, it's just.
Damn, it's like that, huh?
And again, I want to preface not everyone. Okay, they're
Right, right.
Israelis are a diverse group just like any other, so they're not all the same.
So, what was their
Uh,
reaction to you when you would acknowledge that you were living and working there? Like, did you ever confess to any of them that, or?
well, I mean, when I crossed the border, so if I'm coming into Tel Aviv, I have to say
Mhm.
why I'm coming in there, yeah. And so you can imagine they'd always be quite surprised when I said, "Oh, I'm going to Gaza. I teach at the American school." Because I had my ID card and had a letter, yeah,
Uh-huh.
saying that I was working at the American National School in Gaza, and the authorities in Israel were aware of that. They're aware of that school because they wanted to avoid bombing it um, back then. It's no longer around. The school hasn't been. I think the school was destroyed in 2007 or 2008. I don't know. But at this time, yeah. And there were other people who would go into Gaza. There'd be UN people. There'd be other NGOs. There'd be journalists. There'd be doctors. People, all kinds of people come in and out. So of course, so as soon as I would go to check in at the passport thing, and I would say that I was going into either to
Tel
come
Aviv.
back to Gaza, then I went into a special route. So then I get taken to a room somewhere, and someone would come and ask me all kinds of questions, and then I would wait, and then maybe half an hour, 45 minutes would go by, and somebody else would come in and ask me the same set of questions, but slightly varied. And my bags would be fully checked and sniffed by dogs and a variety of other things, which fine, fair enough. There wasn't intifada going on for that. I mean,
Yeah.
I wasn't. So it was like, but obviously as soon as they knew where I was going, their demeanor and their treatment of me was quite different. So then I became a suspect until proven otherwise. And again, and then crossing Erez, of course, they knew if you're crossing Erez to go into Gaza, they know what you're doing. So that would be, yeah. So then there was obviously there was no hiding that. Um, but sometimes you'd have some questions, especially not so much at Erez, but at Tel Aviv. They'd be really surprised, like, so you live there? Yeah, I live there. You live with the Palestinians, yeah? Well, that must be so difficult for you. I go, well, only when you guys are. I said, like, when I was a bit more brazen, I'd be like, well, only when the bombs are dropping, only when the helicopters are coming in, or you've cut off the electricity or the water, or I can't get out because the border's closed for 2 weeks or something. It's like, but I was like, no, I go, yeah. I mean, it's a more conservative culture, so I'm not going around in shorts and a tank top. But no, it's not. No, because I had the school owned. All the teachers lived in the same building, so it was like an 8-story building, about
Yeah.
half a kilometer from the Mediterranean Sea. So I was on the 7th floor. I had 3 bedrooms. I had a jacuzzi, spa, air conditioning. I made a generator, backup generator. I had a view from the Mediterranean from my living room.
Damn, that sounds pretty cool.
So I mean,
Yeah, that sounds nice.
so like our residence was very nice,
Okay.
and again, we were allowed unless there was a military operation going on or something going, or they had gotten or they had intelligence that something was about to happen and everything was closed down. We could also leave when we wanted to. It might take a few hours. It might take quite a while to get out of to cross the border, but my colleagues and I could get out unless it was closed down for a military reason or for whatever. And there was usually I could always get out. There was a couple of times when the border was closed for a few days or a couple of weeks, and it wasn't clear like how long it was going to be lifted. But then there was more pressure on Israel because this was before the blockade, and there was more foreigners in there, and so they would have more pressure, like at least to let these people out. Like, why are you keeping these aid workers or these diplomats or journalists or teachers or nurses or whatever it may be? Let them out. So yeah, so then but yeah, they'd be surprised, like, so you speak Arabic? Oh God, and I'd be like, no, I don't even know, like maybe 10 words in Arabic. Well, how do you teach? And I go, it's all in English. And they'd be like literally surprised. Well, they know English? You can't sit like that, Anthony. You look very weird.
Sorry.
It's like you're
I was
melting.
actually stretching my
You're
legs.
melting into some sort of like you're some Star Trek character or something.
Yeah, no, my bad. I was stretching my legs actually, but
No, it's fine. I just was gonna tell you. It just looks like he's melting. He's melting away. It's like, okay, like what's happening?
But I'm sorry.
Yeah, so they'd be like, oh, they know English. I'm like, well, yeah, because they just have this idea like they're somehow, sorry to use the word, but like all retarded or something. This is very like, I'm like, no, they're quite smart. It's really smart. And I go, like any other school, you have a variety. You have some good students and not so good students and in between students. Oh, but that must really be hard to discipline. I go, no, not really. They listen. I mean, I very rarely had any student talk back to me. Sometimes they'd have a disagreement between themselves that would carry over to the classroom, but very rarely did because their parents would not tolerate that at all. So that was my experience, at least.
Yeah.
And again, but I was also going through. I was teaching 7th grade through 10th grade, and so these are students who they weren't like brand new to the school or to the structure. And also, there's other schools in Gaza, but they were quite stressed, and huge classrooms and whatnot. This was technically a private school, but because this is another thing that you might find interesting is that whereas like about 70% of the population, give or take, excuse me, in Gaza are refugees, that means that 30% aren't. So there were people living there when all these refugees came in, also Palestinian. Not all Arab, mostly Arab, but there's a few Jewish Palestinians. There's also a few, not very many, but Christian Palestinians, but most of them are Muslim. I didn't mean any atheists, at least none that admitted it. but that's another thing. So 30% of the people were not. So you had a class divide there. So you had people that were refugees. So if you're a refugee, you come and all you have is what you have. And there's the people who were the landowners who owned the land there. And so you had quite wealthy families. So the people that lobbied the American International School, because the same company or organization that had the American International School in Amman, and in I want to say Beirut, and also Egypt. I know Egypt and Amman. I think also Beirut, but not sure. The families there, the rich, the I'll just say rich for lack of a better words, elite families in the families with means in Gaza, lobbied this organization to open an American International School in Gaza, and they basically said, and this is what was told to me at least, I wasn't privy to these meetings, is that look, we know it's not financially viable at all to open up a school here. We'll float it, like you do. You come in and you like, cause then it's certified, so the kids can go, like the degree they get there is recognized internationally, and we use your structure, your all this stuff. Your administration and rules and all that, and we'll support it financially until such time as it can support itself. So these rich families are the ones that were supporting, that were paying for this school, yeah, one way or another. So of course that wouldn't work out very well in Gaza if there was this nice school that only the rich families' kids got to go to. So about 70%, if not more, about probably like 70% of the students that went to the school were refugee students who were on scholarship.
Right. So when you say refugee students and refugees, do you actually like? Were they literally homeless, or what was their living situation?
Well, I mean that's what a refugee is. So it's like they had to leave. They had to flee their home, yeah, because so various times since 1947, there's been various flare-ups in Israel-Palestine. So one thing was called the Nakba, and this is in 1947, I want to say, when there was a lot of Palestinians, as I understand it, were pushed off their land. They fled, and they had to go somewhere. Some of them went to Lebanon, some of them went to Jordan, and some of them went to the West Bank. Some of them went to Gaza. Yeah, and then there was the Egypt. They call it the Egypt-Sinai War. Anyway, there was something in '67. So there's been these flare-ups. So whenever there's a flare-up, whether like small or large, Israel will take over territory and then not give it back. And technically, if you take over territory during war, or then you're supposed to give it back afterwards. Yeah, but Israel has never done this. And also, so you have that, and then you have the land that's taken. There was a Nakba in '47, which was when a lot of Palestinians, as the history that I'm aware of, and of course there are histories that there are different accounts of this time period. Yeah, but the Palestinian one, and not just Palestinians, but there's also been other historians, Israeli, Jewish, non-Jewish ones as well, said that there was a big purging in 1947. They call it the Nakba. The Palestinians call it that. When a lot of Palestinians were pushed off they had to flee because they were worried about being pogromed or whatever it was. So a lot of them fled to. So that was the first round of people being pushed off their land and then not being able to come back because Israel would not let them come back after hostilities ceased. They wouldn't let them come back. And then they would put other people on it, settlers, and settlers would start to settle it, obviously. So it's easier to keep land if you have people living on it, not just guns protecting it or whatever it is. And then there's a war in '67, and that's when Egypt was involved in. I don't know who else was. I can't remember the time. And there was another. So that created more refugees. And then since then, there's been, large and smaller incursions. There's been military operations, but there's also been just the settlement activity. When settlers will go there, they'll decide they're going to settle another small piece or patch of Palestinian land. The Palestinians get pushed off, and the settlers take up shop, and the Palestinians have to fuck off somewhere. So they have to go to the West Bank or Gaza, or if they can, if they have somebody who can help them, they can go to Egypt or Jordan or
Right, but
wherever. Well, the
right.
Palestinian
So
Americans, Palestinians in Britain, there's Palestinians all over the place. Um, but those who either don't, but those there are people who don't want to go,
mhm,
yeah, because they know as soon as they leave the land is gone, because that's been the trend since 1917 when the crown, when the king said, okay, you can, we'll this could be Israel and
mhm.
Palestine, and then when it was finally when it was officially acknowledged by the UN, whoever else, I think in 47. Since then, this has been the case. So that's when they say refugees, that's who they mean. Those the Palestinians who've been pushed or fled off land that is now part of Israel proper, or is now an Israel settlement, which is an illegal settlement as per international law. But of course, who enforces international law? It's usually the United States. So if they don't want to enforce it, then feel free to break it. The United States also breaks it when they need to. Um, so yeah, so that's who the refugees are. But of course, when the refugees who live in the West Bank, there are also people who lived in the West Bank who weren't refugees.
Who
Yeah,
are
same thing in
essentially
Gaza.
as you said, who are essentially well off, I guess.
Well, comparatively, I'm not. I can't say that every single person who wasn't a refugee in Gaza was well off. All I know is the families that I had contact with who were financing the school, who would have me over for dinner, who had lovely homes. I mean, practically mansions, just lovely homes. Um, and they would also tend to be the construction people, the people who'd be in construction, uh,
Mm,
or banking, such as it was there.
interesting.
Oftentimes they were able to have foreign passports because they would be able to go out, and maybe they went to college or university in Egypt or uh, um, Jordan or Britain or the United States or wherever, France, and they would, how, I mean, I don't know, I didn't pry, but I know that there was quite a few people, maybe 30%, I don't know,
Yeah.
who had foreign passports. They were Palestinian, but for somehow they also managed to get a passport. Um, and also, funny enough, a lot of Palestinian men had married Ukrainian women.
What?
I met quite a few Ukrainian women. I mean, not a lot, but I mean, because again, the reason why I know this is because the one place in town there was the UN club,
Okay.
and so the UN club, so it was the evacuation center, but it was also a UN club, so they had a bar and restaurant, yeah. So if you had a foreign passport, you could become a member of this club and you could drink. So that was the only place in Gaza where alcohol was not forbidden. So if you had a foreign passport, you could become a member of the UN club, and then you could go to the bar. Then the bar was open from 11 to midnight. And they also had food, and right on the Mediterranean, yeah. So there was no
Yeah.
window facing the street, of course, because you can't have the locals seeing you, have your fun. Uh, but right on the water. So there was the bar and restaurant. There was a gym. The evacuation part is as well, and a whole outdoor seating part right on the Mediterranean. And so we would go there, obviously, and that's where you saw all the other people in Gaza that had foreign passports. And so you'd see people there with their wives. A lot of times the guys would go there with their wives. Their wives would be there's a few British wives, but there's also quite a few Ukrainian women.
And what was the story behind
Yeah,
that? Behind
I don't,
them
I
having
don't know.
Ukrainian
I don't know.
wives?
I don't know. It's like once you get into the international lifestyle, people meet people. I don't
True,
know.
true. That's pretty cool, though.
Yeah, I was never like, I was just like, okay, so, you know,
Yeah.
the place, the Rosie's, where I got my hair done all the time, Rosie and Ahmed. Ahmed was Palestinian, Rosie was British. A British rose with lovely, fairer skin than me. Yeah, I don't know if they met in college or what, but, and
Right, right.
they had a hair salon, and also that's where three of the gayest men I've ever seen in my life worked, gay Palestinian men. lovely. They did. I mean, I was going there all the time because there wasn't a lot to do in the off time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And plus, you want to support the local economy, and it was so cheap. So I was, I mean, there I could get a manicure and a pedicure for maybe like $10. I get like a 1 hour massage and a facial, and I mean, I was constantly getting fantastic treatments in that salon.
That
Oh,
sounds dope. That
it was
sounds dope.
really like every because also they were Christian, uh these two. And so literally I would just maybe spend like all day Friday or Saturday there just getting one treatment after the other. I mean, then I
Wow.
would,
Okay.
and it wasn't just me, it was my colleagues, my other colleagues. There was four of us who worked at the National School, women who were single. Um, and yeah, we'd spend all day there, then we'd go back home, and then we'd go eat, and then we'd go to the UN club, all like printed and print, like all like it was very odd. So and now, in the UK, like maybe I go to the salon like, every 4 months or something, and it's just like you're like, oh, maybe in the summer in June I'll get a pedicure,
Yeah.
because it's so expensive. But there it was like, oh yeah. So I mean, except for the extremely high unemployment and the not infrequent bombs and raids or Apache helicopters coming in, it was not difficult for us. So
That's a and yeah, that to me is interesting considering like being there in 2002 when it said that all of that sort of it would have been flaring up at its like most, I guess I don't know what the correct word would be, most intense intensity, I guess,
well, this was
between
the time. This was the age of the suicide bomber. That was the
Jesus
big.
Christ.
That was the shift. Okay. I don't
Yeah,
know who
yeah.
was the first suicide bomber, but that when I was there. One of the differences between, as far as I know, don't quote me, but I think this is true, that the first Intifada did not involve suicide bombers, but the second Intifada did. So, and this would often be, so this was the thing, is that it's so, and I don't know anymore how many suicide bombers there were, but whenever there was one, usually Hamas, or there might have been, Hamas was the main group, but there wasn't the only group. There were two others as well. But one of them would take responsibility for it. Yeah, and it was basically the idea that they don't Gaza or Palestinians don't have, they're not a state. Yeah, they're an occupied territory. So in Gaza, Israel controls the land and what gets in and out, but inside they tend to leave that up to the Palestinians. So whatever kind of norms and government they want to have within Gaza, that's up to them. Uh, but anything that goes in and out, Israel controls, and Israel reserves the right to go in and do whatever it wants, whenever it wants, because the Palestinians don't have any civil rights in
Right.
Israel, and also they don't have a state, so there's no one who's obligated to enforce their what we call human rights or natural rights. So they're kind of rightless uh, vis-a-vis any state, or yeah, vis-a-vis any state, they're rightless, they're stateless. They don't have, so yeah, so a bit of a thing there. Informally, yeah, of course, but so let's leave it at that. So one of the ways that Hamas one of the ways that they adapted is I don't know whose thought it was. I don't know who the first suicide bomber was in the world, but this became a tactic. So if someone could get into Gaza, into Israel, so at that point the borders were tight, but they weren't closed, and there was also a lot of cheap labor. Gaza has Palestinians have always been a source of cheap labor for Israel. So Israel can decide how many work permits they want to allow Gaza to have, or the West Bank to have as well. But it's mainly, I think this is more of a thing for Gaza. How many work permits they want to have, and then the people who want to work inside Israel, they go through a vetting process, of course, and then they go through the border, and they're checked, and then they get on a bus, and they're bused to wherever it is they're going to work, and there's obviously surveilled, there's security the whole time, and they get back on the bus, they're taken back to the border, and then they go home. But that is a means of income, and so those are, you can imagine that whoever gets to hand out those work permits, that's a nice type of patron-client relationship, of course. Because let's say that you have that Israel decides there's going to be 15,000 work permits, so day laborers essentially, 15,000. Someone gets to decide who those 15,000 people are going to be, and if you're that person or that group, that is a good place to be in, because then people, you can imagine the kind of kickback. I mean, I don't know this for sure, but I don't know what kind of gifts or special treatment. But of course, if you have a place where there's around 60% unemployment, and if you have 15,000 work permits for a season or a month, those are going to be quite coveted. And it's one of the carrots and sticks that Israel has. But anyway, so the thing we'd have to do then is, as far as my guess would be, is that if you wanted to if you get a kid or a young man who's willing to willing to do this, they would have to go through that process somehow of getting into Israel. I guess the main way would be as a worker. Back then, it was still very militarized and very surveilled, but not like it is now. So maybe they could also sneak through a fence hole or a tunnel or something. I don't know. But then they would, and they wouldn't get to military areas, obviously. So they would bomb themselves on a bus, in a crowded square, in a restaurant, this type of thing. Yeah. And so that was what really, in my mind at least, is what was quite different about the Second Intifada. And of course, it wasn't the only thing going on, because the Intifada is like kind of to shake off. So it's basically like trying to liberate, trying to free yourself from this occupation, and a call for everyone to do what they can to do that. So of course, most people weren't doing that. But it doesn't take very many suicide bombers for it to be like, obviously that's gets people's attention, because it is quite it is terrorizing, of course, but so are big bombs being dropped on buildings is also terrorizing. Just looks different.
True. Did you ever have to worry about that when you were walking around Gaza, about maybe Israel showering you guys with bombs? Or
Well, there was always communication. So usually before the school, I mean, here's the thing, is that a lot of the families that let's say the rich families, most of the rich families, or then I'm just going to say rich, just as kind of a general thing, but so the elite, we also the elite families,
okay.
Non-refugees, whatever, I'll say elite families, people that I knew of who were financing the school I worked at, and owned the nice apartment building that I lived in, and paid my salary, all that stuff. Yeah, they were all members of Fatah. Yeah, so the Palestinian Liberation Authority, Arafat, Fatah, and that's usually quite that was their thing, and they had communications, even if there's, no matter what's going on, and this is still today, it's true, no matter how bad relations are between a country and another actor or another country, there's always informal communication channels going on. So
Right.
for example, if there was going to be they would just say an operation. So someone would get a phone call or a text or something. This is before smartphones, but cell phones were around, saying there's going to be an operation going on for the next 2 days. So we suggest that you close your school down for 2 or 3 days. Don't go there. So they know beforehand, oftentimes, that something was going to go on. So there's going to be something near or around the school, or the route that we take to school, then we'd be notified, and then we wouldn't go, or we'd take a different route to and from the school. They knew where our building was, and they had no desire to bomb a building full of foreign teachers. Now, accidents can happen, but they were not out to get us at all. But where Arafat's main compound in Gaza was about probably like 3 blocks over from where our house was, or our building was. So that was bombed a couple of times. Mostly what happened in Gaza, though, is that whenever there was a suicide bomber or an attempted one or something else that they would attribute to Hamas, and oftentimes Hamas, anytime anything bad happened in Israel, like whether it was a rocket or a suicide bomber, they would take credit for it, and maybe it was always them. I don't know. So then in retribution, there's also a lot of informants in Gaza for Israel, and there's also enemies in between Fatah and Hamas, so they could be turning each other in. So oftentimes there'd be targeted killings. So you could be driving. If I was, let's say I was in a taxi and I was going, who knows where I was going? I was going somewhere, and then there's a targeted killing that you could hear an Apache helicopter come in. Usually that'd be by Apache helicopter, and someone would have marked somebody's car or somebody's whatever, and then that would be bombed, and then they would go away. So if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time with that, yeah. But that's what you do, because if you decide to go and live in Gaza at this point to work there, both your embassy and the Israelis, of course, would say, we really recommend that you don't do this. Yeah, because we can't guarantee. There are hostilities going on, and if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you just realize that. So I could have been at the wrong, I could have been in the car behind, and I could have been in a taxi behind the car that had been marked for an assassination via, an Apache helicopter or whatever else. That could be the case. I could have been at a student's, because the students' families would invite you over for dinner all the time.
Yeah.
And most of them lived in refugee camps, and so the refugee camps, the poor ones, were hotbeds, or were Hamas's base. So whereas Fatah and the PLO were more of the, for lack of a better word, middle to upper caste or class Palestinians, Hamas was with the working and the poor.
I see.
Poor. And they would, they also would, they would help. They had widow and orphan funds. They would pay for school uniforms. They would try to, because if I remember correctly, the guy who started Hamas before it was Hamas, he was, obviously very very religious, but he was a doctor. He was a medical doctor, and he had an NGO, and it was in the poor refugee camps in Gaza. That was how Hamas started before it was Hamas.
Okay.
I'm exciting you with your.
No, you're good. I'm listening.
No, you're yawning.
No, I'm yawning because I'm good.
Usually I see somebody yawn, or I think about a yawn, then I yawn. But I've yet to yawn. I have yet to do that. So you cannot break me, Tony. Anthony, you can't break me.
We're good.
So yeah, so that was the main threat, but also because the rich, the elite families ran, financed that school, and were elites there. So the word went out basically like, don't mess with our staff, don't mess with our teachers. That and again, it's a very hospitable culture. Anyway, so they want guests to feel welcome. They're always wanting to feed you and ask you how you are, and very welcoming. So there's already that going in, but also it was like, yes, it's the American International School. Yes, there's Americans there, but they're not their government, etc., etc. They're our guests. They're here to teach our children. So basically, don't fuck with them. And the school, again, they were smart, because it would not have gone well at all, politically or culturally, just to have a nice school there and only let the rich kids go. So again, the vast majority, about 70% of the students, were refugee kids. And so also their families. So it was basically, the word was out, like, don't mess with these people. We're responsible for their safety, and be nice to them. And of course, so that plus the fact that the culture is just, very welcoming to guests. Yeah. Of course, it didn't mean that I was never, that you were never stared at the street, or kind of ogled, or, catcalled or something, or followed. Like, there'd be times, like, if my friends and I were going around, like, say we're like going out shopping, and there's 2 or 3 of us, and we stand out because we know we're yeah, we just would stand out. And then you might get a group of guys who are, nothing else to do. They kind of just follow you around and they're trying to talk to you. And even though you're giving the signal, like, we're not here to socialize, we just want to be left alone, they're still kind of following you around for a bit. And then someone would tell them to, buzz off. So there was that. There was that. But
Yeah.
other than that, it was not difficult. I mean, it's a warm climate compared to where I came from in Portland, Oregon, except for in the winter, of course. If I had been in that climate, so like when I was in Israel or other places, so when I would be in Israel on the weekend maybe, or traveling around there, yeah, then I'd wear shorts and a tank top and your summer dresses and whatnot that I wouldn't wear in Gaza. Not because anyone told me I couldn't, because you just know. I'm not an idiot. I'm like, yeah. You look around and see how people are dressed. You're like, okay, I'm gonna dress like. And we weren't expected to cover. I mean, we weren't expected to put a scarf on or anything like that. But yeah, we always dressed conservatively. I wasn't, we weren't going around trying to show our peacock feathers or whatever.
Yeah, I can imagine, considering how you've kind of painted the picture of how it's a very sort of like, not necessarily sexually repressed, but sort of sexually frustrated place.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that. I mean, obviously there's lots of babies, so people are having sex. But the thing is that, and then this is back. It wasn't as bad. The unemployment was high then, but it's really high now because it's been blockaded since 2007. So you can't have any kind of economic growth at all if you're blockaded. So as the population increases, the jobs are not increasing. So right now, the word is that there's like 60%, of men are unemployed.
Damn.
So it's hard to get a wife if you don't have a job. And it is still, it is a Muslim country or culture, so you can't have more than one wife. But there's informal rules. Like you're not supposed to have more wives and kids than you can afford. Yeah. But so that, and I don't, different families have different takes on that, but you can't have more than one wife there. But you're technically, I mean, well, there's not a law. I mean, I don't know, but you're culturally, you're not supposed to have more wives than you can afford and more kids than you can afford. But yeah, you can imagine it's hard to get a wife if you don't have a job. And so yeah, and it is a conservative culture, so I can't go to say like how much extramarital sex there's going on over there. Who knows? But obviously, it's not like, yeah. I mean, you don't broadcast your business, and you have to be if you're a woman, your reputation is everything, so you'd have to be very careful about that. I can't speak to what's going on, but of course, yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of sexually frustrated people of it, just the fact that if you have 60% unemployment, and if you're not, if you're unemployed, you don't come from a family that has means, you're not going to be very successful on the marriage market. So, and I don't know, it'd be an interesting study, but though it seems kind of silly now, given the genocidal bombing campaign that's going on there now, to see like how many to the extent that marriages with men with multiple wives has increased. Because if you're a man, if you come from a family that has means or a job, then compared to the guys who don't. So again, the people, the guys that go to Hamas, the fighter ring. Because again, I think it's important to keep in mind that Hamas is not just the fighters or the Al-Aqsa Brigade, that Hamas is also like the municipality. So they're also the only kind of civic structure there. So the schools, so the social services and the roads or whatever, in line also with NGO groups and charities and whatnot. But they also do that. So there's kind of like there's, because it's it won an election, so it's responsible basically, for lack of a better word, municipal services, both social and physical, in Gaza. And then there's also, of course, the Al-Aqsa Brigade, the fighters that you see on TV. And then they also have different ranks, yeah. So there's the higher ups, So they're
Hmm.
just like the foot soldier dudes, younger guys. They're the ones that you saw going in who like didn't have shoes and maybe were just there with an old gun and they just have like their jeans and a t-shirt and maybe flip flops or not because they're And then you have the guys that you see on TV who look like they're the more the what we would say officers or the higher ups. And that because even though it's not a state, so it's not considered official army. Obviously, they use the same structure. They have
Right.
they have it's hierarchical. There's whatever. So there's the political side, there's the municipal side, and there's the coercive side, just like there is in any other government political entity. Any country you have the services, you have the you have the bureaucrats, the people doing the services and the whatnot. You have the politicians and you have the coercive wings. You have the military and the prisons and the police. Same thing there, just smaller scale and not a lot of finance and in a blockade situation. So people often think, and they're only encouraged to think. So I'm not going to blame them. But if you're outside of this, you have no idea. You hear Hamas, you just get this picture of this guy in your head with the scarf around his face and the whatever kind of gun they have, saying
Right.
Allah
Right.
Akbar. Allah Akbar. That's the image that you get. And of course, there are those, but most people that are part of Hamas are not soldiers or policemen. They're just bureaucrats, politicians.
Interesting.
Of course, the politicians do have ultimate control over the military wing. And there's, as far as I know, two of the guys who, at least I don't know. This is what they're saying on the news, at least, who call the shots strategically for Hamas,
Yeah.
actually in Qatar. So you
Wow. Go
know
figure. Right. Yeah.
how that works. Again, because I want to preface that um, I lived there for 2 years, and so since then I have people who I'm still in contact with in Gaza and a couple in Israel, and I try to keep apprised of what's going on there, but it's not my main focus. So when things would flare up, then of course you kind of try to crash course again to see, okay, has anything really changed, or if it's because what I've seen since 2007, there hasn't been any qualitative changes, just kind of quantitative changes about how tight the screws are tied on Gaza and the West Bank. But now that Hamas, now with what happened on October 7th, the status quo has been kind of thrown up in the air. So we don't know what's going to happen.
Right. So, over the duration of time that you were there in those 2 years, what were some of the sort of like responses from the people on the ground within like sort of the friendships and stuff that you were building towards their experience living there over the course of their lives? Like, what was the sort of things that they were talking about?
Well, I mean, what was difficult for me, because I was with dealing with students, spent most of my times with so they were 11 to 16 years old, or 17 as it would be when I was done, and so they still had hope, yeah. So
Yeah.
and I remember so listening to them because they would be like, what was interesting from their point of view, it was what they could not understand. It really baffled them how anyone could be afraid of them. How people would find that they should be afraid of Palestinians, and Palestinians are dangerous because who they're afraid of are Israelis and the IDF. They were the
Mm.
ones who, with the raids and the bombs and the whatever and they could take anybody prisoner if they wanted, and you would have you'd just be at a loss you have to go informally try to find out what's going on. And so they were terrorized by, so they saw Israel as who people should be afraid of. They saw them obviously as the aggressor, as the terrorizer, as the occupier, and all this stuff. So it's really baffling to them, even when some of this stuff started to kick off with Hamas.
Hmm.
Um, but even then, it was surprising to them that the outside would just think that they were the bad guy, that they were the dangerous people, when that was not their experience, which makes sense. Another thing is they were still had hope that at some point the Arab countries, the Arab governments would intervene. They would say enough is enough. and they would apply pressure to Israel and the United States. And even at that time, I was suspicious. I was like, because we see that now. If you follow me, of course, the regimes and the population are two different things. Although they obviously the regime, if too many of the people get tired of the regime isn't long in power unless they really clamp down militarily on dissent. But every time something flares up with Palestinian with the Palestine situation, Qatar will say something, Iran will say something, Egypt will say something, Jordan will say something, Saudi Arabia will say something, but they don't do anything. They don't do anything because they don't want to piss off the United States, and so there's this edge. They can't be too. They have to say the right things. So on one side, they have to say the right things, and of course, the Palestinian should be free, and they'll use the word occupation. The Israeli occupation has to come to an end. We have to go back to 1967. Blah 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 blah. But they don't do anything. They don't apply any force or pressure, and so. But still, at that point, there was always hope with this generation, probably also maybe their parents, that at some point enough will be enough, and if not the international community, the Arab countries, the Muslim countries will say, okay, this is enough, and maybe say we're gonna cut oil production.
Come in and save them, I guess.
Yeah, we're gonna cut oil production until. We want there to be good faith peace talks. So this is going to happen, or we're going to whatever. They could not. There would be repercussions, of course, but the United States does have a lot of financial and military power, obviously. So but so there was that, and I remember specifically towards the end. I think maybe it was a month before I left, and it was the year 11s was all boys. So the other grades were a mix of girls and boys, but year 11 for some reason was all boys. So it was 12 boys.
Okay.
There, and they were like, "Okay, Miss, you never really told us what you thought about like what your advice would be, blah blah blah." And I told them, they were all quite bright. They were all quite bright. And I said, what I can't remember my exact words, but I was like, if you can get out of here, you should get out of here. Because I don't see it getting any better.
Right.
I don't see my country changing its position on Israel. I don't see Israel changing its kind of modus operandi, this kind of slow bake thing, that incrementally, when you can, you take more property, more land here, more land here, more land here. You can see it. You can see the spatial project. You can see it. The maps that are out there. You can see that. And so that's been going on since 1917, and in earnest since 1947. And there's not much left.
Right.
So any excuse to have to take more Palestinian land in order to have Israeli security as it goes. They do. The U.S. has always backed that. Oftentimes, EU does. UK usually always does as well. I didn't see that changing. And this was before the blockade. This was before Hamas was elected in elections in Gaza in 2006. I want to say 2007. So this is before the blockade happened. Okay. So I was basically like, if you can get out, you should get out, because I don't see this getting any better. And now it's like, because it's also the realization that you're not supposed to say this, right, Anthony? But the only thing that Israel and your government, your government, I'm still a citizen of the United States. The only thing that the United States and Israel responds to is violence and economic pain. So
True.
If you can't inflict violence and or economic pain, they can give a fuck. So
that's what makes that to me.
So the people who are like, well, who are pearl clutchers, like, well, this the Palestinians all have to condemn Hamas because this doesn't help their cause. It sets their cause back, and Hamas is terrible for the Palestinians, and that may all be true. However, what I will say is, and I'm not the only one that's saying this, is that since this has started, Palestinians, uh, from one type of group or another, with various levels of international uh, organization, have tried every peaceful, non-violent means possible to resist and come to some sort of bring this occupation and now apartheid to some sort of end. And every single time, Israel quashes it. But if it's within Israel, Israel quashes it. If it's outside Israel, the United States and the EU, the United States quashes it at the United Nations. The boycott, disinvest, and sanction. Again, you had governments coming out and saying basically that's illegal. So
Right.
so these people are gaslighting. I don't know if they're lying to themselves. They're certainly gaslighting Palestinians and anybody who knows anything about the situation. It's like every single type of peaceful means possible has been quashed, has been denied, has been called anti-Semitic or some other bullshit. And so if you deny peaceful means of redress and resistance, you are guaranteeing violent ones.
Right. And that to me
So
is what makes that.
it's like if you have not been condemning and decrying the treatment of these people, and then you wake up on October 7th and start demanding people condemn Hamas, all I have to say is fuck off. I just have
Yeah,
no time for it.
I'm with you on that because
I,
to me,
I agree. You see that image, you're like, Jesus Christ, you just see that image, that's all you know. Okay, fine. But
right.
that's not all people know. The left knows very well, a lot of them. So they
Yeah,
just
and that.
have to game. And it's like if you have been saying nothing, and now all of a sudden you have to be like condemn Hamas, have Hamas derangement syndrome, then I'm saying you're part of the problem because these people are not allowed. They're denied. They can't organize geographically. They can't organize economically. They can't
Mhm.
organize politically. They can't boycott, divest, and sanction. When they did the Great March to Freedom, when people unarmed started to walk towards the wall, the part of the border wall in Gaza, to break out the border wall. What did Israel do? It shot them. Had snipers there, shot them, shot all of them. What did the international community do? Nothing. What do these people do now who are condemning Hamas? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So I'm just like, it's terrible. Of course, it's terrible. But occupation is not a occupation is a nasty business. Apartheid is a nasty business. Uh, Revolts get violent. So I'm not happy with it, but it's just this idea that somehow, everything's a-okay or pretty good over in Gaza, and every once in a while the natives get restless and decide they want to kill some Jews. It's just so preposterous. It's just ridiculous. Um, you're back on.
Yeah, my bad. I switched to my laptop, but
No, it's
yeah,
okay.
I
So
heard
that
everything.
was my pitch. And
Yeah, I'm with.
it takes a while for people to get there. And I'm not, no one knows who I am. But it takes a while for people to be able to say, I'm not going to play this condemn game. I'm not going to do it.
Right, and
I
to
like it. I
me,
don't condone it. I'm not happy about it. But I'm not gonna sit here because that is exactly what benefits this Zionist fascist regime in
right.
Israel. Is every time you say Hamas, like yeah, Hamas, because we have to do this, because of them. It's all their fault. But for Hamas, everything would be fantastic for everyone in that region, and it's bullshit. It's just bullshit.
Yeah,
So,
it's clearly BS. And to me, the horrible thing about this is that what's revealed is that, man, the United, like, why even people need to understand something. The United States is not an honest broker in anything.
not
like
this.
like
No.
yeah, because it's like with everything you just said, those people are under the impression, God bless them, that there's a sense of rationality, there's a sense of decorum that the United States and Israel are going to abide by, and it's not. The United States doesn't abide by any sort of rationality of like, okay, let's make a deal. It's more so of like, no, we're an empire and we're just going to do as we
They do what they
please.
want because but so far they've had bad success. I mean, they have had they. I mean, well, if you look at everything since World War II, um, then the U.S. has not had politically, like they didn't get what they want. Well, I should say, if we look at what their official reasons were for the
Mhm.
Korean War, that didn't work out. The official reasons for the Vietnam War, that didn't work out. And then there's the dirty wars and the proxy wars going on, especially in Latin America and Central America. Uh, if they were able to, their point was to get a regime in that was could share their interests, which would let them basically give the U.S. de facto veto power over economic policy in their country. I think is basically what that meant. So uh, if your economic policy, if Washington is happy with your economic policy, then you are a good regime. If Washington is not happy with your economic policy, then you're a very bad regime, and you should be toppled. Or we'll support. We'll go to your country to promote democracy, or something like this, and then God help you. Um, Historically, so there's that, and then what? Then you had the first Iraq, which apparently was just to get them out of Kuwait, but then all this other stuff happened. And then you have Afghanistan. Taliban
Right.
has that now. Iraq. Uh, I guess again, I'm not a total expert in the military part of it, but from people who seem to be trusted sources, it seems that at the end of the day, that Iran's influence in the region has increased since the quote unquote war on terror, and that and now with Saudi Arabia and Iran making overtures, like they're going to try to get along,
Mm-hmm.
or at least not. They're gonna maybe they're at least they're both seems to be an interest in not letting this Sunni Shia divide be weaponized and instrumentalized by outside actors. Perhaps we'll see in its early stages that could change. But yeah, the idea that the U.S. And people have this, and also the people that think that U.S. foreign policy is about what's good for the average American. These people are high as a kite. But again, we're not encouraged Americans to look into this. If you're busy and all you do is you have your whatever education you got from high school, and then if you took what's in college, if you never, if you didn't happen to kind of stumble into some radical, lecture or seminar, or you didn't kind of team up with somebody that had like, who I'm talking about. Who knows? You meet somebody, you take a class, you stumble upon something else, and like, oh, I haven't heard that before, or someone whatever. Then you could go your whole life and have no idea how much bullshit we're fed
Yeah, you're
over and
right.
over again.
Yeah, you're
And
right.
then they know it's bullshit, but just don't want to acknowledge that it is because then what? So I don't know.
True.
But
It's
I don't know
yeah.
if you got to if we're really at a point where we know they're lying to us, or we'll just use propaganda. Propaganda is a better term because propaganda doesn't necessarily have to be a lie. It could be a
Mhm.
lie in the service of something. It can be a truth in the service of a lie, or usually it's kind of like one-sided. So you have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you leave things off because you're trying to fit your information to a particular narrative. But so I use propaganda. So it's one thing I think now. I used to think that a lot of people didn't know that most of us didn't know how propagandized we were, or how much our consent was manufactured. But now I'm starting to think that people know, they just don't care. It's like I know that you're lying to me, I know that you're gaslighting me. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, Rachel Maddow, Sean Hannity, whoever. I know you're gaslighting me or telling us bullshit. You know that you're full of shit. And you know that I know that you know, but yet it goes on and on. I think that might be the case for most people.
Yeah, yeah. I think that definitely
Because we're
that's a
just like, well, I don't know if there's that much cynicism, or like, what are you going to do? So it's very postmodern. So you just pick whatever bullshit sits with you the best, and you just go with that. Like your fantasy football team is my fantasy news team. It's my fantasy foreign policy team.
right.
And I'm
That's
with it no matter what. He's telling me the truth.
right. But it's
No.
interesting. because like
Biden is a saint, and he's
yeah,
Christian.
there's
He would
also
never do
spiritual
anything to put
involved.
a baby in danger.
But
Yes, I believe.
yeah, I think it's funny. I was looking at some of the comments underneath like the Piers Morgan YouTube videos or CNN's videos, and I think a dualistic aspect to what you just said is also like here in the United States. A lot of these people are fearful conformists, and so a lot of the comments are
What do you
people
mean
doing
by
that,
fearful conformist? I know what you mean
meaning
by.
that
I know what those two words mean separately, but what do they mean together?
meaning that they internally know that it is bullshit and that Israel's wrong, but they're so scared to sort of go against the grain that they do automatically a both sides things, or they're like they act extremely neutral, and they sort of like generalize it to sort of like that coexist sticker. Have you ever seen that?
No, no.
Where
The
it's like
coexister? Good God,
you,
why are we going out of our way to make our language more difficult? Go ahead.
that bumper sticker, the
It's
bumper
hard to say
sticker
both sides.
coexist.
Both sides can coexistiger.
The bumper sticker. You've never seen that bumper sticker that says coexist?
Well, I've seen that, but coexistiger, I didn't know that was.
Right, but it's like basically those kind of people who are
Yeah.
basically
Can we all
saying,
just get along? Can we all just
yeah,
love? Be love?
exactly. A lot of the
Yeah.
comments were like that. And so it's like people are scared to sort of like go outside the box of conformity to even just like say what they would say. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But also, I think maybe that so many of us have these, to quote Thoreau. I think it was Thoreau. Is it Thoreau or Emerson? I think it was Thoreau. Live lives of quiet resignation.
Right.
That it's so foreign to us that for something they can't imagine that someone would be so committed to a cause that they'd be willing to bomb and kill all kinds of kids and babies. Or there'd be people so not wanting to give up that they would stay and try to make it through that. I think that's also part of it.
Yeah.
If your biggest decision is Coke or Pepsi or vegan vegetarian or my preferred pronoun, or am I going to vote
Right.
for Joe Biden or not? I just don't know. Who no matter who, because Trump's so bad. I'm sorry, people. I know that a lot of people, there's downward mobility. Life is difficult with getting through the day and doing your job. A lot of people have jobs that are mind numbing and soul crushing and body crunching. I get that. So I want to talk more to the people who don't have that.
Yeah.
The PMCs. They're the who will target. Yeah. They're also the ones that keep this imperial machine going. Yeah, they're the ones that they're the managers, the bureaucrats, and all this stuff. So the professionals and the managers who keep all this going. If they stop, if the people who are doing the admin and the logistics for all this stuff stop, this would also stop. So if the people who have to drop the bombs or whatever, if enough of them say no, it stops. If enough of the people behind the scenes who have to do all the admin and logistics, and some of them stop, this would also stop. So it's not just a matter of getting enough people on the street, which does send a message that people aren't buying the bullshit, but it doesn't necessarily make them change what they're doing. Yeah.
Right.
So, because you can think about the anti-war thing before they invaded Iraq in 2004, there was huge protests. I don't know if maybe they were smaller. They were smaller than they. Didn't matter. Because again, how you protest. If not, I mean, it's great to go out. All these people who are going out and basically letting other people know, the media know, and the politicians know that we don't buy this. We're not buying what you're telling us. That what's going on in Gaza is wrong. It needs to stop. At least, at the very least, it needs to be a ceasefire. There needs to be something going on here. I applaud all of them, of course. But if we're really going to change how America operates foreign policy wise, then again, you have to hurt them financially, or be a legitimate threat of hurting them or one of their uh, interests violently. That's the language they use
Right. And
overseas. They use
yeah,
violence, financial violence, and violence. That's what they use.
yeah, and I find it kind of interesting that over the last few years, if I'm not mistaken, our the United States, individual states have passed sort of like laws that essentially outlaw BDS, if I'm not mistaken, right? I know
Yeah,
Florida did
it's
that,
it's, it's anti-Semitic, don't you know?
right? So it's like the one thing
Yeah,
that was
Palestinians.
working,
I
they
have to say that every time I can. But sorry to interrupt you. I have to say it again like, every time I can. Semites, Arabs are Semites, so that means Palestinians are Semites. I'm pretty sure that all the people that are native to the Levant region in that
Mhm,
world, in the world, are a Semitic people. So it was nothing to do with religion.
right.
And and if there had been lots of Arab Germans or Muslim Germans, uh, or in there, then they would have been the Germans. The Third Reich would have been against them too, because they were all about they didn't want the blood being mixed. Yeah,
Right.
didn't like the Jews, of course. I'm not saying they were not like rabid anti-Jewish. Obviously, the Third Reich and before that, there wasn't a lot of rabid anti-Jewish hatred and going on in Germany and other countries. But the Aryan thing, as I understand, is they also so aside from their hatred of their scapegoating of the Jewish people there, uh, they very much wanted this purity of blood thing. Yeah, so
Mhm.
that has nothing to do with religion. That's that's an ethnic thing, and so before before the people who in that area who subsequently converted to Christianity and then what do you call it? Muslim would have been Jews or something else beforehand. So, but a lot not. There's also this idea, and again, there's Shlomo Sands that is one historian that's covered this. He has two books, and there's other people who covered it. And Shlomo Sands has a book called something I think it was like the invention of the Jewish people or inventing the Jewish people or something like that.
Mhm.
And then the invention of Israel from Holy Land to homeland. And he tracks this, and other people have tracked this as well, saying that obviously, yeah, after when things were going on in Rome controlled Judea or Palestine, whatever they called it, uh, a lot of Jewish people did leave, but a lot of Jewish people stayed, and a lot of the ones that stayed converted to Christianity or to later to Islam or whatever. So if you go back far enough, I mean, these people are related.
Yeah, I saw
You know,
recently.
you go back a few thousand years, so there's like similar ancestors there. So it's this idea when
Right.
they say anti-Semitic. I know that people use that they use anti-Semitic to mean anti-Jewish, but a lot of people don't know that Palestinians and Arabs are also a Semitic people. So that what religion you are doesn't change. And I realize that there's overlap between that um, the old Jewish people practice the faith, but they're still Jewish. I know that. I get that. But still, the fact that people don't seem to realize that Semitic people did not start with Judaism. That it preceded it technically.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That to me is this sort of like conversation around those people's sort of identity that's tied into this narrative of national heritage and homeland. That to me, that's the thing that we can't ever really dissuade or argue against, because you can't argue against something that's make believe. You know what I mean? Like if somebody believes in something that's make believe, you can't argue against it because it's totally emotional and passionate.
Well, I don't know if I'd use the word make. I mean, there could be make believe, but it's ideological. It's an ideology, yeah. And so
Yeah.
then, when an ideology guides your actions, and those ideologies start to have real world material consequences. Yeah, I mean there is a country that's called Israel. There's a state called Israel. Yeah, that so. And of course, Zionism is a complete ideology, but but their project has been quite successful. Yeah. But that doesn't mean, and it seems impossible now. And of course, I have no control over what happens in Israel and Palestine. Everyone, Israel/Palestine, Israel-Palestine. It's what people do there is what's going to matter. So what the Israelis do, what the Palestinians do, what the people around there do, what the crazy Americans that they send people over, what they do. I mean that's what's going to. But in the end, mostly it's going to be what Israelis do and what Palestinians do, and the countries that border them. That's what's going to come down to. But right now it seems impossible. But there are still people who say that it's already a de facto one state. It's already the one state solution has already happened. The problem is it's an apartheid state. So you can say that, but to get people to be willing on both sides, especially on the Israeli side, since they have the upper hand, especially with the U.S. backing and they have the military and all of that, to say, okay, let's end the apartheid. Let's incorporate all the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza as full citizens of Israel with full rights, same rights as us. Now that is scary, but it could work. But the thing is that there'd be people on both sides that would try to sabotage that like anybody's business. There's a reason why prime ministers who started to get too close to a peace deal with Palestinians were killed by their own people. Yeah, there's assassinations there.
Wow.
I think, and even I think that this is my feeling. Because when I was there, and from what I still, the information that I have, is that the vast majority of Palestinians would be happy with that, but there'd be a part of Hamas still and other people who would try to sabotage that. They want all or nothing, and that would be on both sides. And so what would happen is that this hypothetically, again, if they got people say, look, it's already one state, but it's an apartheid state, so let's get rid of the apartheid and let's just be adults and just figure this crazy stuff out, because so that our children and our grandchildren don't have to be dealing with this crap. They can be dealing with other crap, different crap. Yeah, but the thing is that there'd be extreme elements on both sides who would do everything they can to undermine that violently, viciously violently. And that would be the fact if you had enough people who aren't from the people who aren't on the extreme, which is the majority. It's the majority in Palestine. I don't know if it's the majority in Israel anymore, who would be willing to even be able to imagine that possibility. But let's say that there was enough. If they could come to an agreement to be like, look, we know there's going to be people there's going to be extreme elements on both sides who are going to try to sabotage this, but we will do what we can not to let that happen. So if someone on our side goes crazy, we will try to, arrest them, try them, etc. And if somebody on the other side does that, same thing. So the message gets clear to the people who want to come to a peaceful solution. We're not going to let you crazy people fuck this up. Yeah,
I mean that would be the way to do it.
Don't want us anymore. Now it seems totally impossible, and I have no say over it. But it's not like it couldn't happen. It just seems, from the point of view right now, it seems like
Yeah, and to that,
why would Israel do that when the United States, the UK, and the EU seems totally willing to let them totally engage in this extermination campaign? Why would they all of a sudden stop and say, well, let's incorporate. Let's not exterminate. Let's incorporate. It just seems like. But if we look back in the past, there's groups of people who, back in the thick of the flames, we would have said these people are never gonna figure it out. But it's not like It's not like when I was in Holland that there was blood feuds between Dutch and German people, or or the French and German people, or the, whatever. I mean, in Germany now and Israel have good relationships. So I don't know if it's still guilty. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, it's not like Protestants and Christians or Protestants and Catholics are still trying to, put each other on the rack, as far as I know.
Right.
So this, the North and the South United States. I mean, this type of thing. I mean, it's the thing is that right now it seems like okay, this is just the final solution. It's the last hurrah, and it's just there. A lot of Palestinians are going to die, and they're just going to have to. There's going to be a big refugee crisis, and Israel's going to finally get all the land from the river to the sea, and that's just it. And we're going to have to deal with that because this is the first kind of this colonial project happened in the 19th and the 20th and 21st century, whereas the one in our country started in the 1600s.
True.
It was pretty much wrapped up by when we finally. I mean, I don't know when the last kind of. I don't know if there was ever if there was ever a feeling like some of the Native Americans might win this. I think it was quite clear that it was a losing battle, but just how long it would take. Because again, it's the same thing. You had certain American administrations that were more ruthless towards the Native Americans, and others who were less so. It also depended on the economic situation. They needed people to move west more, then they became more, whatever. But we didn't have, the media and of course the internet to see all this stuff going on all the time. We didn't have people in college, people reading about being anti-racist and how terrible colonialism was, and then watching this and being told that somehow it's just about security, So it could just be that we're just going to have to just suck it up because, again, even though we like to tell ourselves that we live in the free world, we do not. There's people in the driver's seat that we have no control over, especially in real time. I mean, yeah, you can vote somebody out, you can start a movement, but actually doing anything right now is just the cost. The cost will have to increase vis-a-vis the reward for Israel and or the United States to tell Israel, let's let up on the massive bombing campaign. I don't know. So I think that we don't know what to do with that because we're watching it, and part of us is like, well, realpolitik. I mean, the strong do what they want and the weak suffer what they must, and it's not fair, but
True. But my question is this:
I don't think there's ever been a nation state that's established and consolidated itself without violence, and a lot of it.
That's true. Yes.
So it could just be that they're just.
So, do you think Netanyahu is angling to essentially over these next few weeks to maybe just annex the entire disputed territories?
Well, I mean, we don't have to think about it. He's saying what he wants. So, I mean, they're going full biblical. They're making biblical analogies to
good and evil and all
the Old Testament that God wanted smote. Because we forget that in the First Testament,
he literally said smote.
Yeah, well, no, we're biblical now, yo. You have to look at Amalek, Amalek or something. I don't know what it is. Traditional. What is it based on there? Aramaic? I don't know. Sorry. I'm a Goyim. Let's see. Oh no, because if I mean, you're Catholic, yeah.
Fuck no. but
You're not? But you weren't baptized?
No, my parents were young and secular. No, my parents were young.
Well, I knew that you were secular, but I didn't know. I thought maybe you grew up and just
no. We went to different churches and stuff, but my parents were young. My parents are your generation, so it's not like it wasn't. You know what I mean? It was. I mean, it wasn't anything that we lived by.
Although I could have had you. You're 31, yeah?
Yeah, I was born in 1992.
Oh, God, yeah. I could have popped you out. Okay.
Yeah. You're 5 years.
16,
Yeah, you're
15,
5
but
years younger than my mom. My mom was born in 72.
okay, well, this is depressing me. Anyway, so, but no, okay, well, you should read, the Bible is an important book, so you should read that. But anyway, in the Old Testament, so the New Testament's all about Jesus and love and all that stuff. But the Old Testament's a lot of brimstone and genocide and nasty business. So they're making allusions to these groups in the Bible that basically God was like, you're out of here. Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Some of the people, obviously, some people in Israel believe this, or they're there's atheists, Israelis, and there's fully devout Israelis and everything in between, like any other place.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of Christians that love this stuff. Now, we all know that it doesn't go very well for the Jewish people once the Christian end days starts.
True.
Because, but Christian Zionism, I think there's more Christian Zionists than Jewish Zionists. I would bet I would bet on it that there is. And so there's also saying that Jews have to be in control of the Holy Land, and then there's lots of bad stuff happens, and then Jesus comes again. And I've seen the door where Jesus is supposed to come again. It's a small door by a small field, but whatever. I don't know how it works. Less people. I don't know how they're going to fit everybody there for the judgment. Details. But if you go to the old city, and Jerusalem it's a walled city. Yeah, so the old city, there's a wall there. There's different gates, and there's one gate that's still sealed, and it's sealed, and that's the gate that Jesus is supposed to come again. And then the gate is open, and Jesus comes again, and then all kinds of shit happens. All the Revelation stuff starts happening. I think, if I remember correctly. But, so yeah. So we don't have to guess at what he wants. He's saying what he wants. He's saying what he's going to do, and then they do it. So they're basically saying, even though they know that Egypt hasn't opened the border,
mm-hmm.
They're basically saying, you need to get out, and if you don't get out, then anybody who's not out. So they're basically now like, anybody who's still in the north of Gaza at such and such time is going to be considered a Hamas combatant, no matter who you are. So we're like, and then just pretending that, again, they're not saying this for Palestinians. All these statements, notice how they're saying them oftentimes in English. These statements are not for Palestinians. They're for you. They're for me. They're for an international audience to say, look, Israel gave them warning. And, so this is not for the Palestinians. The Palestinians know who they're dealing with. This is for an international audience. They're saying all this crap about, please go to this side so we can bomb this side and go back to that side and we'll bomb that side and go up, this type of thing going on. So I think that best case scenario for Netanyahu, I think at the end of this, if he doesn't have a substantial chunk of land to give to his constituency, he's done politically. He's out of there. He's probably going to go to jail. Because before this happened, there was a lot of mounting hate, upset about him, and he has a lot of criminal cases.
Isn't he indicted? Isn't he technically indicted, right?
Yeah, well, I don't want to get too much into the weeds. People can look at Haaretz. So Haaretz in English is very much, I guess you call it liberal publication, for lack of a better words, the oldest newspaper in Israel, and its op-ed pages are filled with criticism of Bibi Netanyahu and his regime before this happened. And so you can look at it. There was judicial reforms, and basically they wanted it to be easier to get rid of judges. You can imagine if you and your group of your administration is being indicted, that it's good for you to be able to fire judges.
Right.
And this was why people were in the streets protesting like week in, week out against this, saying this is crazy. But there are other things that his administration has done. One of the things is not just saying that we're never going to give up the settlements that we have, but it's the government policy to have more settlements, to increase illegal settlements. We wouldn't say illegal, but as per international law, people like to say, which is fine if there's somebody who will enforce it. Yeah, is that. So my thing is that he's hoping at the end of this that he has at least maybe a third of Gaza that he can, so maybe so that would be, it's 25 miles long, so a third would be like 8 miles. Yeah, so if he has 8 miles to give over to some new settlers or to people, it's lovely beachfront property. Yeah, so if he can dole that out, then he can probably survive politically. If he comes with less than that, or if he comes with less than that and a lot of soldiers have died, then I think he's done. But it's quite clear that he's going to go as far as he can. Obviously, they're pulling out all the stuff. Talking about children of darkness and children of light and associating Palestinians to these tribes or these peoples in the Old Testament that were genocided, righteously genocided, as per the good book, Old Testament, before Jesus. And, if you look at what they've already done and what they've said, it's quite clear what they want. What they've always wanted.
Right.
The regime. The more left, the center to right regimes. That's the goal, is to have Israel from the river to the sea, which means, and Ilan Pappé, who's an Israeli historian, I think he's Israeli British now. I think he finally left because he wasn't popular. His books, he was trying to offer a truthful history, a true history, based in fact and historical record about Israel. And a lot of people in Israel, not everybody, quite a few weren't too happy about that. Another one of these self-hating Jews. Anyway, Ilan Pappé, for anybody, is a good source on this, as is Shlomo Sands. But first thing would be Normal Finkelstein's books on this. Normal Finkelstein, he's been focusing on this issue forensically, and no one's more moral than Norm for like 40 years. So his books are great. A source, Ilan Pappé's book. So Ilan, Pappé's Pappe. The E has a little thing over it. Okay. Shlomo Sands, can't get more Jewish sounding than Shlomo. So Shlomo Sands, Sands. His books are really good, but when I read his books like 10 years ago, and I wouldn't read them like I would read them now. So it was just kind of taking it in. There wasn't an impending genocide to stop. It was at that point it was just kind of the status quo, everyday type of apartheid going on. But from what I recall, quite interesting in terms of the invention of the Jewish people, and also Israel, the invention of Israel from Holy Land to homeland.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying these people are, dropped from heaven and are flawless, but you very much get the idea. I would say that I know for sure that they're trying to do serious, scholarly, fact-based, historical-based work to the best that they can. They're not trying to do some type of thing.
Yeah,
and that's but anyway, I'm sorry, I've gone on, but Ilan Pappé thing, he said there's a book called The 10 Myths of Israel, and he has 2 quotes that I use all the time, as of late, is that the Zionists want as much of Palestine as possible with as few Palestinians as possible.
Right.
That's all you need to know. And if you keep that in mind whenever you hear somebody say something about Israel, especially from the administration, you have to keep that in mind. The goal is as much of Palestine as possible with as few Palestinians as possible. And to say that the Jewish state, the Zionist project Jewish state, is predicated on the annihilation of the native Palestinian. You can't have a Jewish ethno-state with a supermajority of Jewish people with a large Palestinian population within its borders. Can't have it. So it's quite simple. But they live in the world, yeah, so it's what they can get away with, and also what their population can get away with, because there's points in times when the appetite for this wanes. Lately, it's been increasing, and of course, you have more generations now that have lived in Israel and who are taught a particular story.
Right.
You know, so if they're taught up thinking that there's these interlopers, there's still these dangerous interlopers on our land that we have to contend with. You know, but they're also, you know, it's not there are also lots of you'll see there you also see there's Israelis peace activists and people, and there's also some Israeli not politicians, well, there are a few politicians, but journalists, historians, peace activists, human rights people who are very much against, publicly against what's been going on in Israel their whole life, or since they became politically aware of it, at tremendous professional costs, and they get threatened all the time, as you can imagine. So I want to make sure I don't want to paint the brush that every single person over there is the same line. Obviously, enough are, or you wouldn't have the situation that you do. So.
Right. Yeah, I think for our next episode, we should definitely look into getting like an Israeli on here that can sort of explain to us the sort of on the ground politics that are going on in Israel right now. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be good, but no one knows about us, so it'd have to be a personal friend.
No, I've noticed because like you said you're a fan of like RBN, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, those people and some of the other indie people, or used to be indie people, because they now all blew up. But they all just sort of started like what we're doing right now, and they would
no. I mean, that's why I said we have to just. I mean, I'm fine with starting where we're starting. Just saying that I don't know who I could call. I'll be like, hey.
I mean, I honestly was thinking. I mean, this is not an Israeli person, but like, there's this one of those barricade hosts I follow. So I was just gonna like hit him up and be like, dude, you want to like come on our show and like we interview you? You know what I mean? And talk some politics.
But there's also the fact that we could do like if they want to do that, that's great. To have a 3-way or 4-way conversation, that's great. But also, I have enough. If I know that I can put together like kind of a bit of we could share. We have a couple of PowerPoints with just some details, just kind of a geographical overview and also historical overview of key points. I mean, I could do that myself. But of course, if we're able to get other people on, that's great. I have someone I'm going to talk to tomorrow.
Okay.
She's a Kurdish woman. And we're going to talk about just what's going on with there's a person I know over at the Twitter or X, and she's Kurdish.
Oh, okay.
Her and I have been communicating just because about how another thing that this has been a litmus test. What's gone on this month has been a litmus test in more ways than one. Just about the racism and the chauvinism, the cultural chauvinism that we've seen. But for us who are maybe still call ourselves feminists, but definitely into women's rights campaigns, who have seen just the extreme levels of chauvinism, Western chauvinism, come out of feminists and women's rights campaigns. Like somehow, I guess there's no Palestinian women. I mean, it's just been like amazing to watch all these. I stand with Israel. I'll stand with Israel. It's like, okay, you're a women's rights campaigner, but you're a feminist and all this stuff, and you don't realize that occupation is particularly difficult also for women, for children. It's just been like, what the actual fuck? So her and I are going to talk about that, just what we've seen and
that's dope.
what it means, what it shows. There's still this idea that Western feminism is about saving brown women from their own culture. There's still very much that. Because so we're going to talk about that. So
let's do that. Let's do that for our next episode. Yeah, have her on.
But the thing is that her schedule is different than yours. So her and I are gonna do like at noon tomorrow.
Oh shit.
So you can see it, but it could be just she's nervous, because she hasn't done something like this before. So it could be that her and I don't even get off the the waiting room. But there are a couple of other women who I also want to talk to. I'm just working on getting their schedule straight.
Yeah.
And at that point, if I can, because one of them is in Australia, so God, can you imagine? So, but whenever possible, if I can, if it doesn't require you to get up in the middle of the night, I will, of course, bring you in. But not everybody's the night owl I am, yeah. So it's like
I don't mind the evening at all. I don't mind the evening at all. Except for
that would be like what? That'd be like 4 a.m.
4 a.m. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah. You're right.
But anyway, no. But you can certainly watch it if you want. You can if we end up going online, and then we could any comments or questions you have, we can have for the next time she comes on or somebody else comes on, because there's lots of women. I've been talking to a couple of women who are just like, this is just, there's women who, especially with the fighting back against the gender ideology, and these women who've been just totally aghast at how they've been monstered in silence, and how the other side never gets into the media and all this stuff. And then October 7th happens, and they're all like, I stand with Israel, and there's just they won't broke any kind of anything. And we're like, what? So you're basically doing what you were complaining about doing when it was about the gender issue, but when it comes about the Palestinian issue, you're all the way over there. And more or less, what women who you've been in the fight with this issue for 5 years are trying to say. So there's a lot of people who are like, and I was talking to another woman who was very surprised about some of the British feminists and British women's rights campaigners, how they've been so quick to and to fall into the civilizational thing, to not even talk about Palestine, none of the history, none of the land grabs, none of that. It's about good and evil. It's about Western civilization. It's about Western values. I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, is it really? Okay. But anyway, but whatever it is, this works for them. This obviously, And so then I started to think about it, how I wonder how many of these women who I align with on the gender ideology issue were active in pushing out and smearing Jeremy Corbyn as an anti-Semite. I'm beginning to think a lot of them were the same.
Really? That's a weird correlation.
He was totally smeared as an anti-Semite. And
I know that.
Yeah, but it's just like all of a sudden, all this stuff came out. How all of a sudden, who knew that there was so much, hardcore Jew haters in the Labor Party? And I don't know. I don't know every single Labor member. I mean, I don't know what's in people's minds. Yeah, but the idea that they were able to successfully ruin him politically, in terms of he could have been the next prime minister. He got more. He was and even though he's kind of, if you see him, you're kind of like, this. It's kind of surprising. He's not the most charismatic fellow, but actually got a lot of young people interested in the Labor Party. People are coming out, and it was a coordinated thing that first it was just that he wasn't tough enough on anti-Semitism in the party, and it ended up being like he's just an anti-Semite.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember how they
out. And then I have Keir Starmer, and it's all of a sudden all of a sudden he went from being left to being Tony Blair's. I think they decanted him, and dusted him off. And I'm starting to think that maybe that a lot of these people these women who were on the left, who are critical and surprised about how gender ideology has been just mainstreamed. I'm like, I wonder if some of these women were also the ones that were Jeremy being pushed out. So we'll see.
Have you ever asked any of them?
Well, there was never a point, because you're talking about when basically it's like, do you know that men can't be women? Yeah. Do you think that women can have penises? No. Then that's really the only. That's like, you think it's a bad idea to stop kids' puberty if they think, that they might want to be the opposite sex? Like, yes. It's like, so are you against sex lobotomies? Yes, I am. Are you against men saying they're women getting into, the drill.
Yeah.
That was basically the case. It never occurred to me that, especially, and of course, there's there's women and men from all across the political spectrum who haven't forgotten that there are two sexes and that you actually can't change your sex, even if you change your name or cut off a body part. Yeah, most people I think actually probably almost everybody knows that, but people just pretend not to because I think it's polite. I don't know. And then there's people who make money off of it, and people who turn their fetish into an identity, and all kinds of things. I wish I could turn my love of Diet Coke into an identity. Don't you shame me, God damn it. Or whoever knows, some weird kink I have that I would never think to show anybody. I was like, why should I be ashamed? I should be celebrated for the weird things that I do. Anyway, so it never occurred to me. Yeah, but it's really been surprising. Women who are on the quote unquote on the left side of things, who are very rational, very critical, who just have, hoisted that Israeli flag and I stand with Israel, and are using the discourse of the civilizational discourse, this Western values versus barbarism type of bullshit. And there's a lot of us who are like, what?
Right. Yeah. I love that last one. You're like, what?
What? Well, the thing when it first started and trying to be like, trying to put out something about when the first thing that happened October 7th, thinking, oh, Jesus. And trying to put out stuff about just the back. Keep in mind the background. It's important to contextualize. Yes, this is atrocity, but all this stuff. Like, how can you say this? Look what they did to these babies, and blah 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 blah. And how can you? What kind of person supports this Hamas and blah blah blah? I'm like, what the fuck? It's coming at me.
Oh, them and babies. It was the babies.
I'm just like, and I'd be like, how many babies do you think? And then I got pissed because I'm old and I don't give a shit anymore. And also, I'm not working for any institution at the moment, so they can't fire me. So, and I'll, if I have to scrub my internet identity, so what? My son has somebody, he can do it for me. Anyway, hopefully that's not the case. But it's just like, how many babies has the UK military killed? How many babies has the U.S. killed? If you talk about militarily, just from bombs and whatnot, and Agent Orange and all kinds of bullshit, and then from sanctions, tell me, oh moral one, how many babies has your lovely Western liberal democracy killed?
True, not just killed, but also trafficked.
Do we care about babies now? Really? Is this the thing? Then you are the most killing motherfuckers ever. Suck on that.
And not just killing. The United States also traffics babies and children. I just want to put that out.
In the United States, I mean people in the United States.
Yeah,
I mean government policy, but yeah.
Yeah.
I hope not.
I think yeah.
Well, no, I mean the black. I mean we're far from Gaza now, but the black market trade, obviously, there's always negotiation, informally or whatever, between the black market and the not black market.
Right.
So of course the United States, or the CIA or whatever. I mean, they're not above letting people have. It's this kind of thing. If we really wanted to stop the drug trade, we could probably stop the drug trade, at least for a while. I mean, it would pop up again, but you could stop it if you really wanted to. So, I mean, the trade, drug use, that's hard to stop, but where it's coming from. But there's a lot of money there, and people pay off the right people, and who knows what. And I don't know. But I would just say that the negotiation between the quote unquote black market and the white and the non-black market, so what's regulated and what's not regulated, what's criminalized and not criminalized, in between, it's always a negotiation, because you can't stop everything unless you go totally fascist, which apparently that's the direction we're going in. So
well, I'm gonna table it there because I want to get some lunch. It's like we're 2 hours in, right? Plus I want to watch some of these NFL games right here. I don't know
You're
when was the
allowed
last
to
time
have your
you
Sunday.
watched professional football, huh?
You're allowed to have your Sunday.
Thank you. When was the
Yeah.
last time you watched professional football or any of our
Oh
sports?
God, it's been a while because it's not popular here.
Right.
And I didn't realize until I moved overseas how important the commentary was. And it's
Mhm.
something weird about watching an American football game or American basketball game with some British dude's accent, or so. And when I was in Holland, some Dutch dude. It's like it's just weird. And so then if you want to watch it live, of course, then the hours are all crazy. So I
True,
just
true.
haven't really seen much of it because it was just so weird watching it with if it was in Dutch commentary or if it was some British guy.
Mhm.
So I don't know. But when I was in the States, though, I would watch basketball and football American football from time to time. But lately,
Yeah.
no. Well,
Oh,
lately, like the last few years.
yeah.
Every once in a while, my son got briefly into basketball, and we watched a
Oh,
bit.
yeah.
But
That's cool.
then because he should. I tried to tell him because he's 6'4", all arms and legs. He might even get taller.
Yeah.
And he has the body for basketball, but he's always wanted to do something else. He wanted to do rugby, and I'm like, rugby. And then now he wanted to do boxing, and I'm like, oh, maybe, but he's literally all. I showed you a picture. He's all arms and legs. I'm like,
Right.
dude, you should be like doing the javelin or pole vault, like the I don't know whatever it is,
Yeah.
or basketball. For whatever reason, it's like he's gonna do what he's gonna do. Anyway, okay, Anthony Medina.
Okay.
I'm not talking smack. You want to say something? You want to say hello?
Oh, hey, what's up,
I'm
man?
here to say hello and go over my crap. This is my. I finally got a co-host for my podcast. Oh, you have to go down.
Hey, what's up,
This is
man?
awesome.
Hey, what's
He's
up?
from LA.
Nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you too, man.
Yeah, you flirting with
Love
my
the
mom.
haircut.
No, he's
dude.
freaking good.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Look at this. Look at this. He has a hickey. He has a
Oh,
hickey.
you do.
But
Oh shit.
your
That's dope.
webcam
Huh?
is mom.
No, he's saying my webcam's weird. No, you can't.
Oh, okay, that's dope.
Oh no, Jesus.
She knows.
That's dope. Okay.
And she hates.
Oh God. Okay, bye.
I'm
He
gonna.
has to go watch football.
Oh yeah, mom, don't keep him waiting.
Dude, he's a grown man. He can go off. He can log off whenever he wants.
Is it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know. I got to put away all the clothes. Yeah.
How's it? Wait, hold on.
Jesus.
How's it that your kids have like British accents? Like, how's that?
Because we've lived here for 4 years.
No. I mean, how's it for you? Like, how is that for
Oh,
you?
I don't even hear it anymore.
Oh,
I've never
okay.
lost my accent, so I don't know. Some people lose their accent. I didn't. So when we go out to dinner, because my husband's Dutch, he's fully Dutch, born and raised. And we moved here in 2018. Also 5 years almost. Yeah, no, 5 years. Oh, no, it has been 5 years. Sweet Jesus. So he was 11. Oscar was 11 when we came here, and my girls were 5 and 4. And so all of us, when we go out to dinner or go out, all 5 of us, all of our English sounds different.
Yeah.
We were like, so the last year or so, I don't know why, the last year or so, he's going out of his way to have like this. I think he almost wants to sound like someone from Snatched, or like that what's that? Anyway, like that British gangster movie.
Yeah.
And like he's going out of his way to talk like this lately. I'm like, okay. Whereas my girls, some of their words sound really British to me, and some don't.
Stop talking smack about
I'm not talking smack. I'm talking the truth. And anybody who listens to you for 2 minutes knows that I am telling the God's honest truth about you.
Mom, bro, you kidding, you take.
Oscar, stop. You're also not from the South. Go.
Alright,
Yep. Stop it. God help me.
That's funny. Okay.
Cam and this and that. I'm like, dude, whatever. You're so vanilla. I have a friend from this, and a friend from that. I'm like, dude, you're gonna black friend me? Is this really? Like, I think your black friend is trying to get your ass kicked because I think that if you.
Yeah.
Okay, Anthony. we've digressed. Okay. This is TNT Politics. We're starting this off. We're learning as we go, but aren't we friendly?
I know,
I have a
but
lovely guest room, like a spare room, and from lovely LA. So anyway, yeah. See you next time, and that's over and out from the UK.
okay, sounds good.
Bye.